is China going anywhere? People act as though it's an either or, and you built your whole premise around it being both and, that you can still
Yes,
source
exactly.
some goods in China where it makes sense, but you can also diversify.
I mean, there are lots of things we do today still where there is no other option than China
Mm.
globally. I mean, the best example I have is we do quite a bit in the way of high pressure die cast aluminum. These are highly machined parts that are used in robotics. It's actually been the largest robotics. I can't say the customer, but it's been the largest robotics project in the world for probably the last 5 years. And we make essentially all the metal parts that go in those robots. And the capital, the size of the machines that are used to make these parts are, they're big. I mean, they 4,500 ton die cast machine needs its own building, and there's basically 5 in the world, and there's 2 of them inside the company that we use to make these parts. There's several hundred CNC machines with several hundred CNC operators. There's nowhere else to have those parts made competitively, and even if you wanted to spend the $500 million in capital in the U.S. to set up an infrastructure like this, the talent's not available to do it. There's really nowhere you wouldn't be competitive, and so that's something where we might look to set up capabilities elsewhere that could support 10% or 20% of that capacity, but displacing that and moving that anywhere else, it just doesn't exist. In a lot of these products, like medical instruments and a lot of these industrial controls, that the investment and qualification expense to set up these products is immense, and nobody wants to go through that again. I mean, it's painful, and so to justify moving that to somewhere else is exhaustive, and so what we're seeing is people aren't moving these types of products if they're already established and in place, but they are, if there's a next gen version coming out or a new product, they're trying to establish new areas to source those products. And so we're getting a lot of calls around that, and to be a second source for something, an industrial company that would be already established in China.
We do long-term 5-10 year supply chain planning with our customers, but we also do the shortest term down in the individual factory, down to the production line planning with our customers, and we give them it's a buzzword these days, it's a digital twin of their supply chain, and what that is it's the digitalization of their assets, their transportation capabilities, production capabilities, sourcing capabilities. In addition to that, we build in logic with them. The most important part, logic around how that physical supply chain is going to behave when they make certain decisions. So, air freight versus cheaper forms of freight, things like that. What's going to be the impact all the way through the supply chain, from sourcing of raw materials to the delivery to the customer in that final mile.
Is it really about geography, or is it more about access and infrastructure? I mean, how should companies be thinking about it, about diversification? Should it be a move back to the Americas play, or should it be looking at just the most optimal places in general?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. So from a supply chain planning perspective, a resilient supply chain is one where you can go into that digital twin of your global supply chain and shut down a particular capability. We were working with a very well-known brand name pharmaceutical manufacturer back when the pandemic, I don't know if it's a pandemic yet, but when the virus was still just in China, and they came to us and said, what do we do? We've got to shut down all this capacity in China, both in manufacturing capacity and distribution capacity and everything else. And so we were able to help them simulate around that, at least figure out what's the next best thing that they can do. And you made a point earlier, I think, about it's not necessarily about geography, but it's about how mature are your supply chains? How quickly can you move goods from, it might be difficult to move them 100 miles compared to a mature supply chain where it's easier to move the same stuff 1,000 miles. There's a lot of infrastructure investment that I think that needs to be made to make that supply chain more resilient. You know, that's what resilience means in supply chain, is the ability to roll with the punches like this virus and get that API from an alternate source.
One of the interesting examples actually that has been in the news in the last week or two is Regeneron. They have a huge manufacturing plant, or huge by our standards, in the southwest of Ireland in Limerick. And they employ about 1,000 Irish people there at the moment. They're looking to increase that employment. I saw that there's going to be another 400 jobs there very soon. And precisely just listening to what some of the people on this call are saying, I think precisely with that diversification in mind, in order to focus on the COVID treatments, the antibodies, you know, there's other production that's being moved to Ireland, so that those interlinkages and being able to move things smoothly between plants.
We'll be able to, as David mentioned, to have these digital twins everywhere. So not just on the product itself, which was, you know, quite common set of technologies, but on the production systems and on the physical facilities, installations. So we will have this digital continuity among all different elements of the supply chain.